Welcome everyone to the next TechCon podcast interview with Michael Cunningham. Am I pronouncing the name right, Michael?
You got it.
Okay, great. Brief introduction for Michael. Michael is passionate about building great teams and the dynamics that drive high performance, especially how trust, character, and leadership can accelerate results and culture. That passion fuels his work in executive search, where he focuses on matching the right leader with the right opportunity to help shape companies for long-term success. And pronounce this for me, at Lonergan or
You got it. Lonergan
Lonergan
Partners.
Partners. He specializes in deep tech, semiconductors, and AI infrastructure markets. Seems like you're in a very hot space, by the way, where talent and leadership move the needle.
Yep.
Michael, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you
Um,
for having me. It's good to be here.
you and the questions are coming up. Okay. The first question for everyone joining, what problem are you most focused on solving right now within obviously what you do with executive search?
Yeah.
And why does it matter?
I think the number one problem, and I'm going to focus externally because that's where we focus is helping clients solve problems first, is helping companies scale. I think, as you said, Manan, like in the AI infrastructure space, like anybody who's doing something that's pivoted towards like the data center and powering AI are growing quickly. And, there are other companies within semiconductor and other infrastructure spaces that aren't growing as quickly, but it's really for us the biggest problem we're trying to solve is helping those types of companies scale. And, I think especially last year, a lot of the young companies were focused on finding go-to-market leadership talent. So heads of sales and marketing that can bring their initial product to market, kind of help sell a vision and a promise that they had. This year, it's very much about finding folks, those same types of companies find product and operations leaders, kind of essentially getting them they've gone from 0 to 1. Now they're trying to go from 1 to 2 to scale a lot of these early products to mass production volume. And I think they really need strong engineering leaders, strong operation leaders who can manage the supply chain to do that. So I'd say that's the number one a problem we're helping companies solve. And I'd say second to that is just helping some of these larger companies that aren't in that data center end market pivot to that end market. So leverage some of their strong existing technology in order to get into those emerging and growing spaces that maybe they traditionally haven't been in.
So, Michael, what I'm hearing may be very interesting. So let me get this right. You're seeing the AI shift also create jobs, perhaps at the higher end, but is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you are a company, especially in the deep tech market that is trying to sell into the hyperscalers in particular, there is a huge demand for folks both on the go-to-market leadership and on the product and operations side because they're trying to bring these products to market and trying to unseat kind of the sockets that are less efficient from a power standpoint, less efficient from a compute standpoint, because at the end of the day, as you know, AI workloads command a huge amount of it's super power hungry and it's super compute intensive and anything that can drive more efficiency from interconnect to memory to power to compute like that's where all the disruption is happening right now. And so people who understand how to do that well, it's super techy, it's super hard work. I mean, that's what all the companies are trying to disrupt right now.
Okay. And so moving on to the next question, from your vantage point, and you may have just answered this, but within the deep tech semiconductors, AI infrastructure companies, what is changing fastest in the leadership landscape that most
Yeah.
people are still underestimating, perhaps?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I would say too, just to compound on what I said last time, it's really an arms race. I call it like an arms race to win in this design cycle win. I'll use a particular technology, for example. So inside of the data center, like optics is a big topic right now. Optics is how chips essentially communicate with each other, how data is transferred from chip to chip, on the server board. And there's a huge conference last week called OFC in LA, and there's like hundreds, if not thousands, of these new optics companies that are trying to unseat kind of the traditional interconnect technology. Traditionally there are these copper wires that are used for data transfer. Copper's super expensive, it's super power hungry, and now all you got, some companies are trying to use quantum bits. Some companies are trying to use co-packaged optics, which is some kind of slight alteration of more efficient use of copper. Some folks are trying to use light. So that's just an example of like a spot within the data center infrastructure where like things are changing the fastest. As you have this arms race all over again. This happened during the mobile era. This happened during the first PCs, where the infrastructure is sort of being flipped on its head. And some of those companies are going to win, some of them are going to completely fail. But that arms race to kind of get designed into the next kind of chip and server design cycle that will ultimately ship, a couple of years from now, that's what's kind of changing the fastest right now. And so it's a big question mark on who are some of those smaller companies that are going to win.
Okay. And so then the opposite, where are you seeing the most hype that isn't translating into real value for customers?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, I think I think it just depends on the job and depends on the company, right? Like engineering efficiency, obviously, with coding has changed a lot. Communications and research, just with your typical LLMs, even like PR professionals. I know, for example, a media brief that took 6 hours is taking one. So I think all that's real, right? I want to sort of double click on a lot of stuff that's real and that we're seeing. Like whole new jobs are getting created out of helping companies implement AI or operationalize their business using AI. Like most of the traditional consulting companies, that's where a lot of their business is moving, is helping with these AI implementations that used to be called digital transformations. So that's all like really real and big, and I think creating a lot more economic opportunity than people are talking about, and I think goes against some of like the fear cycle that's there. But I think fundamentally, like a lot of the workflows that people are using in business right now are not changing yet. Like for example, we're still using big CRMs. We're still using these large platform tools, Salesforce, MongoDB, like you pick one, right? And those have some AI wrapper on it, but fundamentally there's still a whole lot of experimentation going on right now, and that requires time and energy to figure out how are those kind of larger traditional huge software tools, like how are those workflows going to change, because they haven't been unseated yet. And they've taken some hit in the stock market in the last few months, but they're still like large and pervasive, and people are still buying big licenses with them.
Okay. So your firm has recently expanded its office presence to Texas, while still HQ'd in the Valley. Um, what particular trends in the ecosystem are driving this shift? Or is this
Look,
just
I'm
expansion?
Yeah, it's expansion for our firm. And I will say that, in this kind of post-COVID, what are we like 3, 4 years removed from COVID now? The technology landscape in terms of where companies and talent are at is as distributed as it's ever been. I think that is certainly true. However, Silicon Valley is still, I think, the hub of technology companies. It's the highest concentration of companies and the highest concentration of leadership. So that hasn't changed, but I think for us, we've seen our client base become much more distributed. A place like Texas for us is frankly a lot more business friendly. Like the tax laws are much better. You've seen some companies migrate out of California, and large leaders, leaders with big net worths migrate from California to Texas because of that billionaire tax that's on the docket. So whether it's like Tesla or Oracle or others, it's nice to have a presence here to serve companies like that, but also just reach companies that have migrated from Silicon Valley and are just have much more distributed teams on the East Coast to serve some of our clients out there. As things have kind of matriculated over the last few years from the post-COVID era. So I think those combination of factors is why we do business here. And then Austin, just because of the business environment in Texas, it's a good place to be, and you see a lot of stuff happening here in particular, which is probably not too dissimilar from some of the other emerging hubs like New York or Miami. A lot of folks have moved to Florida as well, as an example.
I'm going to change the next question.
Sure.
Is there a message or insight that you have since you're in the business of actually finding those leaders and connecting
Yeah.
them with the right teams?
I would just say it's kind of the age-old adage. It never changes mine when we do these recruiting assignments. People get really caught up on what's ideal, and they get caught up on finding kind of the bright, shiny toy, the right pedigree. And obviously, people, especially at the leadership level, have to have a certain amount of experience and context in order to walk in and do a job well. But I would just encourage folks like never underestimate the importance of hunger and integrity when you're looking for the right person. I mean, at the end of the day, like if you have to really drag someone into a job, like that's tough, right? Like even if you throw a ton of money at them, I mean, you want someone to join your team who
You need
like,
someone who's thirsty for the water.
yeah, you need someone who's thirsty for the water, and you want someone who is going to kill themselves to do the job well because they're a high ownership individual and because they treat other people well, and that fundamentally makes them a good leader. Like there's
So
so much in any new
what
job you
about the
have to
leaders?
learn.
Do you have a message for them also? The guys you end up finding and
I would The folks who actually end up at the companies that we place. Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. I think that advice certainly goes both ways, but first 90 days is always critical. Show up and really invest in learning in those first 90 days in particular. And don't come in with your playbook. That never seems to work very well. I think people are often scarred by their past experiences too much to where they can't learn and be open-minded in new places. So it's always about kind of going around and taking the time when you jump into a new role to learn. Talk to
is it about
everybody in the
learning?
company.
Is it about connecting with the new team and sort of
It's a,
like
it's both. I mean, that's who you learn from. The new team, the
Mhm.
customers. It's about understanding the context of the environment and coming up with a hypothesis because you can't really create a strategy or a plan. You can have certain assumptions, but you can't until you really understand like what's going on, what's the problem that really needs to be solved.
understood? So last question for the day.
Sure.
What's the one fun fact about you that isn't on your LinkedIn?
I am a fitness junkie.
Oh,
So
cool.
I probably saw my rugby experience there on my LinkedIn profile, but yeah, I love going out and doing, hard stuff that some people think is just pain and misery. That sounds like a fun adventure. So for example, I recently just went out and ran the Austin Marathon without training because I thought it would be a, you know, a
Okay. You've had lifelong
like
training
a
for that.
fun Sunday morning, so I stay fit enough to do stuff like that, but still nonetheless was pretty dang hard. So yeah, I like putting my body through tough challenges.
You're reminding me about this book that I'm forgetting the name of, but the author was also on Huberman podcast,
Ah,
and he's talking about doing these hard things, and how it's actually very rewarding in many different ways, physically taxing yourself. But thank you so much, Michael, for taking out the time.
thank
We
you for
had so
having
much
me.
fun.